A successful businessman in disguise who likes to dress up as a clown turns out to be a serial killer, a sexual rapist, with an entire cemetery under the house where 33 people are buried. A series based on real events begins on December 11th, 1978th year in Chicago. On day zero, Elizabeth Pist wants to pick up her son Rob from the pharmacy where he works on his birthday. But it turns out that the young man is not there. When he doesn't come home later, the family searches the nearest neighborhoods, but to no avail. On the first day, Cheetah Pistoff appeals to the police about the disappearance of his son. The case falls to Detective Joseph Kazenchik. Having clarified, just in case, that the teenager did not quarrel with his parents and did not run away, Kazenchik instructs Officer Rafael Tovar to investigate. First of all, the goods are sent to the pharmacy, where they interview a colleague of the missing guy. She tells about some construction contractor who offered Rob a job. According to the pharmacist, the guy left for an interview with him. In the evening, a policeman visits this contractor named John Wayne Gacy. He is talking on the phone and, referring to the death of an uncle who has just found out, asks to postpone the conversation to another time. He also denies that he was familiar with the missing Rob and had any dealings with him. The product, before leaving, offers the man to come to the station. On the second day, the product reports to the boss about the conversation. He is sure that John Gacy is lying and asks to issue a search warrant for his house. Then, the suspect is invited to the police station to be interrogated. It turns out that earlier the man had already been in prison on charges of molesting a minor boy, but he was released ahead of schedule. According to him, the whole case was a big mistake and the result of slander. After that, his wife left him. I had a wife and 2 children. I haven't seen them since. I didn't mess with him a damn thing. While Gacy is being interrogated, 2 officers, Fanholm and Albrecht, go to his house to search. In the attic, they find accessories for sexual games with a slight hint of BDM, but nothing that would indicate the abduction of Rob Pist. However, the flare of the goods tells him that something is wrong with John Gacy, and he asks to appoint a permanent surveillance of him, in the hope that he will slip up somewhere. On the third day, Fanholm and Albrecht begin to spy on Gacy. At first, he does not pay much attention to the constant presence of police officers. They do not interfere too much with him doing construction and repair work at the head of a team of young builders. John even waves his spy affably at every opportunity. His partners have been following him relentlessly for several days at public meetings, near shops, in pubs and just on the street. Then Gacy's work van is confiscated. Then he calls a lawyer friend Sam Amaranta to discuss a way to get rid of the annoying attention of the police. The Amarants turn to Kazenchik directly, but the detective refuses to just shoot surveillance. They have an investigation here. However, it does not move, which is why Elizabeth, distraught with grief, personally visits John Gacy, but he is not at home. Kazenchik has to visit the Pists to ask them not to do this anymore. If the builder is guilty, they will arrest him according to the law. Realizing that there is no getting rid of spies, John Gacy invites the officers to his house for dinner. During the conversation, he makes a pleasant impression, talks about his successes, acquaintance with First Lady Rosalind Carter, the wife of President Jimmy Carter. He also admits that as a hobby, he acts as a clown at various events, including visits to sick children. Meanwhile, Gacy admits that no one takes clowns seriously. They will get away with any crime. Hell, they can kill a man, and they won't get caught. After all, no one suspects a clown. When Fanholm goes to the toilet, he smells a familiar stench from the basement ventilation. Later, he reports to Officer Tovar that it is a cadaverous smell. There's probably a corpse hidden under the suspect's house. This suspicion is enough to get an extended search warrant. Gacy himself at this time visits the lawyer personally to confess that he gave false testimony to the police. In fact, he invited the missing Rob to his home. The conversation takes all night, after which Sam, leaving the building in the morning, asks the police officers on duty to shoot the wheels. If his client is going to go somewhere, he can't say anything more without violating professional ethics. Waking up with a hangover after a night of confession, John Gacy drives home, led by the police. Meanwhile, his house is being searched. Officer Tovar, going down to the basement, finds a human skeleton buried in the ground. After the first body of a young man, a second one is found. However, the degree of their decomposition indicates that it cannot be the recently missing Rob Pist. Kazenchik informs the teenager's parents that the suspect has been detained, but the fate of their son is not yet clear. The suspect himself is brought to the police station, where he and his lawyer are waiting for the prosecutor. Amaranta outlines the situation to the subordinate. In order not to be fried in the electric chair, it is necessary to demand a medical examination, mow down like a loony, and make a deal with the investigation admitting guilt, so you can get off with a life sentence. John Gacy refuses such a plan. But when the police arrive with a prosecutor named Bill Cankle, the prosecution reports that 2 corpses were found under the house, and offers the accused cooperation. Contrary to her past words and the Emirates' advice to remain silent, Gacy suddenly agrees to show where Rob Pist's body is. You wait. You work for me, remember. To do this, the whole team goes to Gacy's house, where criminologists are operating, led by the Goods. Upon arrival, it turns out that the remains of another person have been found. The number of victims has increased to 3. The product almost breaks down on the owner of the house, so that he admits how many corpses are buried in his plot. Kaczynczyk sends a subordinate to the station to cool down and deal with a bunch of things found that are evidence. John Gacy leads the police to the garage, where he marks the area on the concrete floor with black paint. John Budkovich's body is buried there. The guy worked for him, but one day, according to the killer, he appeared drunk for a salary. Gacy handcuffed him and put a rope loop around his neck to calm him down, but in the end, he overdid it, and he suffocated. Then he used a hole dug under the drain to hide the body. At this time, Carrie Peist, the sister of the missing teenager, leaves the house and goes to the bank to visit Patty Sheik. Patty's brother Johnny disappeared 3 years ago. Carrie fears that his body may rest in John Gacy's basement, which Patty does not want to believe. She is sure that her brother ran away from home when his parents found out about his sexual orientation. Officer Tovar finds a ring of a local school graduate among the evidence. He goes with him to the educational institution to check the lists of students. Among them, there is Johnny Sheik, who disappeared in 1975 year. With this information, the policeman goes home to Patty to tell the sad news. John Gacy offers the police a ride on the bridge over the local river. On the way, he says that Jack Henley is not to blame for all these murders, but Jack Henley. It was Henley who killed gay teenagers after sex with them, and Gacy only buried the bodies. According to him, Jack was a policeman and taught him how to use chemicals to accelerate decomposition. Henley also wanted to clear the streets of immoral filth. But Gacy himself immediately admits that Jack Henley is one of the parts of his personality, adjacent to a businessman, a politician, and a clown. There is John the contractor, John the politician, John the clown, Jack fried evil. Arriving at the bridge, the killer tells the detective that he dumped the victims' bodies directly into the water from here. Among them was Rob Peist. When journalists arrive to them, smelling the sweet smell of a criminal sensation, prosecutor Cankle tells Amaranta's lawyer that there will be no deal. John Gacy needs to be electrocuted. At the police station, the detainee agrees to continue cooperation and asks for a piece of paper with a pencil. He promised to draw a map of the buried bodies. Detective Kaczynczyk goes to the Pist family to report the tragic news. The detainee confessed to the murder of their son. The police are organizing a press conference to tell journalists and the whole world about the arrest of John Gacy, his confession, and the ongoing investigation with identifications. To make it easier to dig up the corpses, criminologists opened the wooden floor in the house. Police coroners are also examining unidentified bodies fished from the river downstream from where Gacy indicated. They find underwear in the throat of one of them. The killer strangled the victim with his own underpants. Amarant's lawyer is tormented by a moral and ethical dilemma. Should he be defending a serial killer who has already confessed to several murders? But in addition to moral torment, this high-profile case will make him famous, which will subsequently have a positive impact on his career. Realizing that he will not take it out himself, Amaranta calls colleagues to invite them to share the heavy burden of the legal bureaucracy. But all as one amicably refuse, not wanting to get dirty in a deliberately losing case. John Gacy is visited by his mother and sister in prison to pray for him. Even the fact that he confessed to the murders does not make the mother doubt him. The lawyer comes next, puzzled about how to save the client's life. He insists on psychiatric examination in the famous Cuckoo's Nest Hospital. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Carrie Peist visit the Sheik under the scrutiny of reporters. They want to support each other in such a difficult time. Disgruntled citizens, including Budkovich's father, gathered near Gacy's house. He repeatedly told the police that he suspected the builder whose son worked for, but they did nothing. The product is forced to calm the upset man, but also to draw conclusions from his words. After analyzing the available data on Gacy, The officer shares shocking information with Kazenchik. If he had not been released early on the first charge, there would have been no murders. This means that the fault lies not with the local police, but with the penitentiary system that released the maniac. At the court hearing, Maranta tries her best to shield the defendant, appealing to his social significance for the local community, and all those good deeds that he did in between serial murders. All this is necessary for a successful application for the appointment of an examination in a closed medical institution. This will save John Gacy from being imprisoned, a convict who wants justice. After the meeting, Prosecutor Kenkel reminds his colleague, in a private conversation, that it is impossible to win this case. His client will be sentenced and executed. Meanwhile, criminologists are debating whether John Gacy, the reigning champion among maniacs with 25 victims, will beat the number of proven murders found by the body. If Gacy wasn't lying, he killed the most people in the history of the United States. In addition, the cops, after learning that almost all of the victims were gay, abruptly cooled in their compassion. Digging in the ground with the others, the compassionate commodity realizes with horror that the killer sometimes buried 2 victims at once. Returning home, the Amarants see that his father's car was scratched, and the citizens are unhappy that he is protecting Gacy. John himself calls a lawyer from prison to personally apologize to his father for this incident. Although the old man does not want to talk to the killer, the son hands him the phone. Later, when the guard brings the prisoner a Christmas treat, he is interested in how he copes with his victims. He looks like a fat squishy. With the help of a Guyson rosary, a hand thrust through a hole for food clearly shows how a suffocating knot can be made. He learned this technique as a Boy Scout. Tovar and Kazenchik go to the Chicago Police Department to talk to the chief of police. They are sure that journalists will soon find out that the police ignored accusations against Gacy for years when difficult teenagers disappeared, and will inflate a scandal of epic proportions out of this. The police chief retorts that thousands of teenagers disappear every year. They run away from home for various reasons. Most are coming back soon, some are not. And to compare the disappearance of children in different parts of the city with a single previously convicted citizen is a matter of more luck than skill. In order to acquire a database for identifying the excavated bodies, the police are requesting files on all missing teenagers and young men over the past few years. But looking through them, they are afraid that they will not find anything. Most cases contain only statements of disappearance. There are no more materials because the police did not investigate. Amaranta gets the help of a colleague named Bob Motto, who was inspired by the speech in court. Together, they hire Dr. Hilly to examine the client's mental state. The first thing the prisoner tells about his difficult childhood. It is difficult to assess those who shun physical violence and the habit of stealing women's underwear. At some point, the conflict with his father turned into a decisive phase, after which Gacy left home. He moved to Las Vegas, where he got a job as a janitor at a funeral home. At the new workplace, the guy discovered new addictions, a craving for male corpses. During the conversation, Dr. Hilly puts various things out of her purse on the table. The mess she has organized pisses Gacy off. Before continuing the conversation, the patient asks to remove the trash. What a mess. If you don't clean up, clean it up. A pathological passion for order is also a symptom of an unhealthy psyche. After returning from Vegas, John got a job and started a family. Thanks to the patronage of his father-in-law, he got a job in a fast food restaurant chain. One day, his father visited him at work to say that he was proud of his son. He became a worthy member of society. Gacy was proud of the praise from his father, but did not stop there. He joined a local club of political activists, where he revealed himself as a talented organizer. Thanks to the screenings of erotic films arranged by him, the influx of young people increased in the club. At one of the club's events, he meets a teenager, Donald Voorhees, whom he once invites to visit. Watching an erotic movie ended with sex, after which the teenager claimed rape. Gacy was arrested and sentenced to 10 years. For good behavior, he was released after a year and a half. Since then, he has developed an undisguised dislike of gays. He did not consider himself one of them, preferring to be called bisexual, and becomes enraged when the psychiatrist mixes up the terms. After the trial, his wife left him, taking the children. But worse, John felt that he had let his father down. He never had time to apologize. He died while his son was being punished for sodomy. Shortly after his parole, he commits the first murder, according to him, in self-defense. After finishing the conversation, Dr. Hilly reports to the lawyers that he has diagnosed Gacy with a whole range of various mental disorders. She is ready to testify in court that he is insane. At this time, Detective Kaczynczyk learned that the maniac had been accused of sexual violence twice during the reporting period. But the police did not take any action. Even the parole board was not informed. And such sloppiness will no longer be able to pull the brakes. In 1979, Gacy's lawyers build defense tactics on the fact that he is insane. A mentally ill person with a split personality who does not realize what he is doing. John himself doesn't like it. He repeatedly argues with Amaranta, trying to correct his own image in the eyes of the public. Gacy wants to expose himself as a victim who has been treated unfairly, while lawyers are trying to save him from the electric chair. Criminologists led by Officer Tovar dug up 27 bodies under John Gacy's house. Despite the fact that this number corresponds to the one indicated by the killer on the map, Tovar wants to continue the excavation. He suspects that there may be more victims. Kaczynczyk has to order him to stop obsessive archaeology. Kaczynczyk himself goes to Jeffrey Null, one of Gacy's victims. However, he does not want to communicate with the police after they ignored his appeal for the first time. After that, the detective and prosecutor Kankel interrogate David, an employee of the construction company Gacy, who has been living in the house with the boss for a long time. The guy admits that at first the boss made a purely positive impression, gave him a job, paid well, and later allowed him to rent one of the empty rooms for cheap. In addition, he often threw parties with alcohol and drugs. According to David, he had no suspicions about his maniacal tendencies. Even when the boss ordered to dig a hole underground for an additional fee, he did not suspect anything. However, the prosecutor, playing the role of an evil policeman in the interrogation, does not believe the worker. Together they go to Gacy's house, where the criminologists have left dozens of numbered pits. Each tablet means a murdered victim. Then, under pressure from Kankel, David admits that once the boss raped him, and, intimidating him with his connections, told him to keep quiet about it. Kaczynczyk then goes to Robert Donnelly, another victim of John Gacy's violence. The guy also contacted the police, but to no avail. Now, having learned that he got off lightly against the background of other victims, he is ready to cooperate. After journalists inflated this story, Donnelly understood that sooner or later his long-standing incident would come up. The hero of the occasion himself at this time, having obtained with the help of personal charm and the ability to negotiate devices for painting, draws pictures with clowns in the camera. The story returns to the 20th of December, 1978th year. The 9th day since the disappearance of Rob Pist. Drunk John Gacy stumbles into the office of Sam Amaranta's lawyer, where they demand more drinks. Pouring sadness, the killer begins to tell how he came to such a life, that he is suspected of kidnapping a teenager. And the police are watching him around the clock. In particular, how he committed the first murder. Activation of the flashback takes the plot to the very beginning of 1972nd year. After celebrating the new year, John says goodbye to his new girlfriend. At the bus station, he notices a lonely guy. It turns out to be Tim McCoy. The teenager missed the last bus, and now he has to wait all night for the next one. Gacy offers to arrange a tour of the city for the guy, after which he invites him to have a drink and a snack. At home, the host unobtrusively inclines the guest to intimacy, and quite successfully. However, waking up in bed in the morning, John sees a guest entering the room with a knife. Deciding that he was going to kill him and rob him, Gacy fights back. Taking away the knife, he inflicts fatal wounds on the guy. Only after leaving the bedroom, smeared in blood, the man sees breakfast in the kitchen and realizes that the guest was just cooking. John receives a call from a friend. She's coming home. In a panic, he begins to cover his tracks, wash off the blood, removes the soiled clothes and underwear, and also throws McCoy's corpse into the basement, with a start, so to speak. But this is not the end of his confession to the lawyer. Gacy remembers the 73rd year. He already had a construction company, and one day his namesake John Budkovich came to be hired as a worker. The guy as a whole immediately liked the experienced pervert. He introduced him to his second wife, and then showed him the garage, where he planned to arrange a room for men's entertainment. Budkovich worked for Gacy for 2 years until he quarreled with him over a salary delay. Then the boss handcuffed him to a pole in the garage. The killer wanted to let the guy go, but as soon as he unbuckled him, the young man attacked him. Fighting back, Gacy kills him as well. From that moment on, he has 2 hobbies left, in addition to his favorite job. In the garage, John throws parties for his employees, all young and handsome guys. In his spare time, he rides the streets in search of men selling the body. He kills these gigolos and buries the bodies right under the house. Then, deciding that he has not done enough sins, John Gacy develops a new hobby, becomes a professional clown. One day, pretending to be a policeman, he forces Robert Donnelly to get into his car. After the rape and torture, John releases the young man, and he goes to the police. The cops come for the man, but he manages to get away. They say that everything went by mutual consent, but he behaved like 3 or 2 times and began to blackmail claims to get money. Having lied that he had no previous arrests, John Gacy jumps off the crime as if nothing had happened. The image of a respected member of society and the laziness of the guards played into his hands. For God's sake, I gave him a ride to work the next morning. After that, John's wife leaves, which only pleases him. Now you don't have to encrypt in the garage. The story of the next victim begins a week and a half before the meeting with Amaranta at the pharmacy where Rob Pist worked. Noticing the young man during the repair, Gacy offers him payment twice as much. The man is waiting in the car outside when Rob finishes his shift to discuss the details. Under the pretext of the need to urgently issue documents so that the guy can start in the morning, John takes him to his home. There he offers him a drink, and when he refuses, he says that he moonlights as a clown. The host shows the guest a trick with handcuffs, easily removing them with a hidden key, and then offers to teach. Having handcuffed Rob, Gacy makes an obscene sexual offer to the guy. When he refuses, the man becomes enraged and undresses the young man. Suddenly, John comes to his senses, apologizes for what happened, and removes the handcuffs. Scared and crying, Rob gets dressed to leave, but sees that the owner has returned with a hammer and a rope to show the last trick. In the morning, Rob's lifeless body, wrapped in cloth, flies from the bridge straight into the local river. February 1980th year is coming. The time of the multi-day court hearing in the case of John Gacy. The prosecution and the defense are carefully preparing for this process, covering the narratives they need in the press. At a personal meeting in a restaurant, Amaranta reminds the prosecutor that one doubting juror out of 12 is enough for him, so that the client is not sentenced to death. The prosecution is also preparing its witnesses. One of them, Jeffrey Gonal, did a disservice by releasing a book before the trial that Gacy is a mentally ill person. The calculation was on his full sanity. Then Kenkel decides to bet on David Cram, a worker who rented a room from the accused during a period of financial problems. Gacy is being smuggled from prison to court. First, a convoy leaves to distract the attention of the press, then a car driven by Officer Tovar. Tovar is still obsessed with the idea that there are more remains buried under the killer's house than they found. In total, John Gacy is accused of 33 murders. As the trial proceeds, prosecutor Kenkel attracts relatives of the victims. Their appearances before the jury should tip the scales in favor of a guilty verdict. Even Detective Kaczynczyk visits the Pist family to convince them to take their side against the penitentiary system and the Chicago police. Having succumbed to persuasion, Rob's parents not only testify in court, but also tell reporters at a press conference that they will file a lawsuit against the state of Iowa, where John Gacy served time. If he had not been released early for exemplary behavior, victims could have been avoided. The Chicago police, who carelessly and sloppily performed their direct duties to protect citizens, will also fall under the distribution. One day it turns out that Gacy, contrary to the advice of a lawyer, filed a complaint directly to the judge, accusing the prosecution of being biased against himself and his defense of improperly providing services. The judge dismisses the complaints, but allows the defendant to decide whether to keep the emigrants as a lawyer or remove them from the case. John decides that it is better with such a lawyer than without one at all. When the goods bring the maniac to court for the last time, he asks him how many victims are actually on his account. Gacy, wanting to tease the policeman, says that 45 is a good number. Almost like 42. There comes the 9th of May, 1994th year. The day before the execution of serial killer rapist John Gacy. The relatives of his victims are carefully transferred from their personal cars to a federal bus that will take them to the place of execution. Approaching the designated place, the prison of the city of Crest Hilly, they see demonstrators on different sides of the road, with diametrically opposite demands. Some are cheering for a moratorium on the death penalty, others are chanting death to the clown. On the spot, the arrivals are distributed to the basement, where they will wait for the execution. Upstairs, in the auditorium with a view of the event room, the heroes of the occasion, former colleagues Kazenchik and Tovar, as well as prosecutor Klang meet. Klang notes that relatives will not be allowed to watch the execution. In order to avoid all sorts of excesses, the authorities decided to do without it. While the audience is waiting for midnight, when the execution is to take place, Sam Maranta's insomniac lawyer listens to the recordings on the answering machine. Most of them are from journalists seeking comment, but one is from John Gacy. With his last call, the killer called the lawyer to dictate abstract memories of how he was doing repairs in his house. In the basement of the prison, an employee comes out to relatives and announces that they can go out with their things. The execution is over. People who are stunned by such a perdemonical do not know how to express indignation in decent words, but the job is done. At the exit, Elizabeth Pist sees Kazenchik leaving. He smiles at her like an old acquaintance, but she looks at him with a cursing look. The series ends with a historical reference. John Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders and executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. After the events that followed his arrest, the Chicago police were reformed and computerized to systematize the patterns of the case from different counties. Of John Gacy's 33 victims, 6 have never been identified. They are buried in various cemeteries in Chicago, and the inscription we remember is stamped on each tombstone.